Hello everyone, I am the storyteller, and tonight I am here just to help you relax, to drift off to sleep by the sound of the waves, like the whispers of old souls. I know you have come to this video not just to hear the story, but also to find a deep, peaceful sleep. But before we begin, please gently like the video and subscribe to the channel so I can continue to tell you strange stories under the dim moonlight. Where are you from? And what time is it where you live? Just relax. Let your body relax. Put all your worries down by your pillow. Let me take you into a world of mysteries where the wind and the waves mingle and unsolved mysteries are waiting to be told. Are you ready? The captives. I have been a prisoner in this camp for more than 1 year. Many of us have died, mostly at the hands of our captors, but some from disease and trauma. Somehow I have survived, but it hasn't been easy. They beat us mercilessly today with leather straps. At least 4 men surrounded us and whipped us. They yelled at us, "Move, you stinking beasts!" They made us run into a wooden structure, then locked us in. I was afraid they would light the structure on fire with us locked inside. But whipping is not the worst. One of the men used a red-hot iron on one of us. I will never forget the screams of agony from that poor chap. It left him with horrible burns. He died soon after. I would estimate there are about 100 of us in this part of the camp. There is a big turnover, with new inmates showing up daily. About every 5 days, about 10 inmates disappear, and 10 new ones are brought in. We are given very simple food to eat, usually either a slurry of corn or a bucket of fetid mush. The captors often walk back and forth laughing at us as we try to eat. Most of the time we have to squeeze our heads through the bars on our cells in order to get to the food. The beatings and torture are bad, but there is something worse. Several female inmates came into the camp pregnant. When they gave birth, the men in charge immediately took the little one away, not even giving the mother a chance to see or bond with it. I can't think of anything more cruel. A few days ago, they came into our barracks and grabbed 4 unfortunate inmates. They used handheld electrified clubs and drove these 4 chaps out and into a separate building. We heard them screaming. But soon after that, there were 4 loud thuds, and then there was silence. One of our informants claims he witnessed the goings-on in there. He said he saw our compatriots hanging upside down by their legs, with their throats slit from one ear to the other. When word of this spread through the camp, there was a palpable wave of horror and panic. Detailing all the brutality and torture we have experienced seems like wasted energy. No one listens to us. There doesn't seem to be any end to this existence or hope for the future. Many of the inmates show signs of depression and severe anxiety. One inmate had been very quiet, but suddenly threw himself against the electrified fence, dying right there. The captors left him standing in his death, leaning against the fence with the full current flowing through his body, his legs twitching and spasming. We suspected that leaving him there was a message to us, not to disobey or try to escape, or that same type of destiny awaited us. Yesterday morning, a very important man visited the camp. We knew he was important because of the way he was dressed. Most of the workers in the camp wear casual clothes or military-style tactical outfits. This fellow was decked out in a 3-piece suit and had a leather overcoat slung loosely about his shoulders. He carried some type of cane or stick. A rumor spread quietly amongst the gathered that this man might be the one they call the Angel of Death. He had us line up for inspection. Any inmates not accurately in line met with an electrified club, ensuring obedience. While we were at attention, he strolled up and down the row, pointing his cane at a few of the inmates he favored. His assistant wrote down the chosen inmate's number, and once he left, those selected were taken away and led into the back of a large truck, never to be seen again. I sometimes stand quietly outside the barracks, and I can see life way off in the distance. There is a park not far from here. One can see people walking their dogs, picnicking or bicycling happily. I can even hear the laughter of children as they run through the park with their parents chasing after them. How beautiful, I think, would it be to stroll in a park, saunter down to a babbling brook up in the hills, or eat peacefully without the fear of violence. I know it's just a matter of a brief time until my life comes to an end. I've lived this nightmare existence longer than I expected. When I first arrived, other inmates told me I probably wouldn't last a month. But I have seen many come and go, to a fate unknown. It would be all too easy to give up all hope. But when all seems lost, one still has the right to dream. That is something they can never take away from us. My dream is to live long enough to see an end to this incarceration and torture, and perhaps even get home to my family, if they still exist. There doesn't seem to be any hope of escape. The camp is too cleverly constructed for that. In fact, in some inmates, there seems to be almost a sense of resignation and acceptance of their tragic existence. I believe they call that Stockholm Syndrome. Generally, our captors do not engage us in conversation or ask us anything. They usually just walk by as if we don't exist. When we moo, they don't seem to understand what we are saying. I suspect they would at least try to communicate with us if we were human beings rather than cows. But today, uncharacteristically, one of my captors stopped at my cage to chat with me. He was one of the youngest of the men and sounded sensitive and caring, as strange as that may seem. But what he said really confused me. He mentioned that he doesn't eat meat and that he doesn't agree with the use of animals for food. I really didn't understand what he meant by that. After all, what is meat? Discarded skins. I remember finding the first one in my closet. I was grabbing a shirt, already late for work, when my hand brushed against it. Warm, rubbery, and yielding in a way that made my stomach churn. I yanked my hand back and stared at the thing draped across the hangers, a limp, hollow version of me, sagging, the husk of discarded scrap. Its face, my face, stared back, lips parted in a silent plea. The eyes were in empty, gelatinous voids. I stumbled backward, heart pounding. What the hell? My first thought was a prank. Maybe someone had broken in, made a grotesque model of me, and left it here. But no one had keys except me, and the precision was unnerving. The scar on my chin from a childhood fall, the crescent moon birthmark under my collarbone. It was all there, rendered in grotesque detail. I grabbed it by the shoulder and shook it loose. The whole thing collapsed into a heap on the floor, as weightless as air but uncomfortably warm to the touch. The closet smelled faintly of salt and decay. I shoved it into a trash bag and tossed it in the dumpster before driving to work. The image of its slack jaw burned into my memory. By noon, I'd convinced myself it was some sort of vivid hallucination brought on by stress. Too much caffeine, too little sleep. But then another appeared. This one turned up under my bed. I was searching for my phone charger, and there it was, sprawled in the shadows as if it had been waiting. The hollow replica of myself, limp and sagging, carried a new, unsettling alteration. The left hand was missing 2 fingers. When I examined my own hand, my stomach lurched. My pinky and ring finger felt cold, numb, almost alien. I spent the rest of the night awake, pacing. The discarded skins weren't hallucinations. By the end of the week, I'd found 4 more. One in the passenger seat of my car, another hanging from the shower rod, dripping as if freshly peeled. Each time, they became less complete. The one on the couch had a gaping hole where the stomach should have been. The one in the garage? Its legs ended in frayed, uneven stumps. The air around them carried a faint static charge, buzzing against my skin. Each discovery left me more hollow, more off. My reflection in the mirror didn't feel right anymore. My movements lagged, mimicking a glitching video feed. And then there was the itching, deep beneath the skin, under muscles, along my spine. At night, I lay rigid in bed, clutching the sheets as my body writhed with an electric discomfort I couldn't scratch away. It came to a head when I decided to burn one. The 5th skin had appeared in my kitchen, slumped in front of the fridge as though it had crawled there to die. I dragged it into the backyard, my hands shaking, the trash bag hissing against the grass. The lighter fluid splashed across its surface, glistening with an oily sheen. I lit a match, my breath hitching as the flame licked the edge. The smell hit me first, a sharp, acrid reek that turned my stomach. Then came the pain. It began in my fingers and tore through my nerves, jagged and relentless as barbed wire. I dropped the match and crumpled to my knees, screaming. A creeping pressure surged beneath my skin, straining it to the point of tearing. The fire hissed and died, the skin untouched. My hands trembled as I ran my fingers along my own arm, and that's when I felt it. A seam, almost invisible, running along my wrist. I tugged at it instinctively, and a sliver of my own skin peeled back. Beneath it, I saw something. Not muscle, not bone. A gleaming dark mass, rippling with a life of its own. By morning, the itching became a torment. My flesh crawled with a million tiny, unseen legs, gnawing from the inside out. I refused to look in the mirror. The reflection had grown wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. Bloated, pale, stretched over bones that no longer seemed mine. My skin hung loose and clammy, as if it had been boiled and left to cool. The newest, discarded skin sprawled across my bed, twisted and lifeless, a corpse dissected and abandoned. Its lips twisted into a leer that mocked every natural expression I'd ever made, teeth crooked and too large for its face. The jaw sagged open, dripping a viscous fluid onto my sheets, the stench acrid and metallic. Its hollow sockets bored into me, accusing, demanding. I couldn't bear it. Something inside snapped. I slammed the door, dragged the blinds down until the room was a darkened tomb, and staggered to the kitchen. My hands found the knife before my mind caught up. The cold steel trembled in my grip as I returned to the mirror, heart hammering. The reflection stared back, and I almost didn't recognize it. The eyes were sunken pits. My lips, cracked and scabbed, quivered against yellowed teeth. My skin, gray, translucent, and slick with sweat, clung to my frame, taut and unnatural, as if it might split at any moment. My fingers shook as I dragged the blade to the seam on my forearm, the line that had appeared days ago, mocking me with its symmetry. I pressed and sliced. Pain erupted, white-hot and electric, but it wasn't what I expected. The sensation burrowed deep, raw and satisfying, scratching an itch buried beneath the skin. The blade slid through the flesh, parting it in a jagged, bloodless line. The skin didn't bleed. It peeled, curling back in thick, mucus-slick layers that made my stomach churn. Beneath it, something pulsed, a living, glistening black mass. The surface shimmered as if oiled, twitching in time with a heartbeat that wasn't mine. It smelled of iron and something sharper, something alive. Breathing heavily, I dug my fingers under the edges of the peeling flesh and pulled. The old skin came away in long, rubbery sheets, each strip making a wet slap as it hit the floor. My jaw clenched against the growing agony, but I couldn't stop. My muscles burned. My vision swam, but I ripped and tore until the ground was littered with fragments of my former self. When I straightened, the thing in the mirror took my breath away. It stood tall, its surface an obsidian ripple of sleek muscle and unearthly symmetry. Tendrils of faint light coursed beneath its surface, illuminating veins that pulsed with a rhythm that felt powerful, infinite. Its eyes glowed faintly, their intensity alien but familiar. They stared back at me, not with fear, but with hunger. The itching was gone. The weight, the sickness, the exhaustion, all gone. What replaced it was sharper, stronger, undeniable. I flexed my fingers, now black and fluid, watching them ripple and contract. Beautiful living shadows. The old skin on the floor quivered, lifeless and grotesque, a shed chrysalis. These weren't warnings. They weren't signs of decay or disease. They were preparations. I hadn't been dying. I'd been transforming. The knife dangled in my hand, forgotten, as I gazed down at the heap of who I'd been. My lips curled into a smile, sharper and wider than it had ever been before. I turned away from the old me, opened the door, and stepped out into the waiting night. A noble death. The end has got to be close now. My end. The end of a life. I still had hope not that long ago, but beaten down, tortured, abused, and humiliated. Not anymore. I lie here in the dark and can only wonder what I have done to deserve this cruelty, and wonder what comes next. This makeshift graveyard is so cold. By the few dim lights, I can see the hundreds, maybe thousands of others, just like me. More are brought and dumped here every day. We cling to life with whatever little bits of energy we have left. 3, maybe 4 weeks ago, I've lost track of the days. My life was relatively normal. Yes, it was culling season, that dreaded time that comes every year when the days grow ever shorter and cold weather sets in. So I was somewhat worried, I confess. But I had survived so many seasons now that I was one of the biggest left, maybe even too big to be chosen. The people who came, the choosers, almost always favored the fairest ones, those of a certain age, about 12 to 15. I was 19 and far from fair. In fact, I was deformed. An accident when I was 7 had left an ugly scar, a bald and mangled patch too prominent to hide. Over the years, others had made fun of me with horrible names and mocking chants. It didn't help that back then I was also one of the smallest of those my age. The few elders left in our homestead tried to assure me that my size was normal, telling me that my kind simply grew slower and would catch up in time, that even my scars would fade. So much so that eventually no one would even notice. I never completely believed them, even though I wanted to. Elders like to fib, to try to make the young feel better, or alternately to scare them into behaving with their wild stories about the great harvester or the horrors of the burning winds. I guess I'm about to find out if any of those childhood tales are true. Even if my captors don't put an end to me soon, I know I can't last much longer, malnourished and exposed to the elements as I have been. Will the great harvester actually come for me to judge my life? I survived a glimpse of the burning winds, if only barely. Will I see them again at the end, in their full wrath? I try to suppress such horrible thoughts, but can't for long. Just the cold itself is almost unbearable now. And to think, up until a few weeks ago, I had never known what true cold really felt like. My whole life, or at least as far back as I could remember, I had lived on the farm. Broad fields surrounded by beautiful rolling hills with streams of the clearest water. It was all I had ever known, my home. If not for the culling, it would have been paradise. This year's choosers had already been coming for a few days, but their assessment of me so far had done nothing but reassure my beliefs. Most discounted me on size alone, with barely a glance. But others, likely those few who did seek a larger specimen, would be excited at first. They would often come up on my good side, maybe wondering how such a tall and rugged choice was still available, only to be disappointed after a closer look. During the culling, my scar was my salvation. In my youth, I had always wished that I could hide it, but now I wanted to turn my deformed side toward everyone who passed by, shove it in their faces, and dare them to pick me. "Look at the freak," I would have shouted if I had been able. "Take me. I dare you." With each new day, my confidence that I would live to see another year on the farm grew, until they showed up. There was nothing particularly special about them. The four of them talked among themselves as they walked among the rows, or at least 3 of them did. The smallest ran about wildly playing in the new fallen snow, ignoring the shouts of the others directed toward him. I could not understand their language, and could only guess at their intentions by their expressions and gestures. The tallest of them walked past with a typical shrug and roll of his eyes when he spotted the bare area so prominent on my backside, but the woman walking next to him surprisingly stopped and lingered. The man turned back. These 2 stood beside me, not angrily arguing, but obviously in disagreement. Their gesturing and so blatantly pointing out my imperfections was rather embarrassing. So since I could not turn away, I shifted my attention to the 4th member of the group, a younger woman. She had taken over the group's attempts to curb the smallest one's rowdiness, and like myself, seemed inclined to ignore the couple's discussion. For some reason, I felt a strange kinship with her, though we had nothing in common except perhaps that we were of a similar age. Distracted as I was, the cold bite of sharpened steel teeth slicing into me came as a complete surprise. I would have screamed aloud in pain and defiance if I had a mouth, but a voice is not an ability of mine. If I had either arms or legs, the tools of mobility, I would have fought back. Unable to protect myself, the sawing continued, cutting straight through the heart of me from one side to the other. Toppling to the ground, the view I had known for my entire life shifted dramatically in a sickening lurch, twisting sideways as I fell and landed in the snow. Cut in half, savagely severed from my underground parts, I truly felt the cold for the first time in my life. It started at the raw, fresh amputation wound in my trunk, shooting up my nearly 9 foot of height, flowing through every branch and needle. Instinctively, I reached out for the subterranean warmth of the soil, only to find more cold and frigid air in its place. Brutally exposed to the elements like never before, I was dragged helplessly through the snow. They hauled me toward the barn, the one that I had looked at in the distance day after day, since I had grown tall enough to peek over the edge of the hillside. The familiar faces of the farming family waiting there briefly gave me hope that I could still be rescued, but they seemed friendly with the tormentors who were stealing me away, even helping them to throw me on top of their curious wagon and lash me down. Riding atop the wagon, we moved slowly away. the only home I had ever known receding behind me. But this was just the beginning of my ordeal. I was taken to their strange shelter and propped up in a corner in some bizarre mock replanting. Over the next several weeks, I was subjected to all manner of humiliation. I was bound with both lighted and glittery cords, had objects of all shapes and sizes hung from my branches, and even made to wear a silly sculpted version of a tiny woman with wings on top of me. I was starved, dehydrated, and deprived of sunlight. My only small consolation was that, inside their shelter, I was able to stay warm. Along with the abuse, the group made me the focal point in odd rituals. They liked to sit in the room with me, either staring vacantly into the lights wrapped around my torso, or watching a slender lighted box on the wall showing pictures of other people and places. And each day, boxes of all shapes and sizes, wrapped in colorful designs, were placed beneath me until they were stacked so high that they crowded against my lower branches. One evening, when only the two eldest of the group were there, they laid on the floor beside me, stripped off their outer coverings, and proceeded to wrestle and rub against one another for some unknown purpose. After the initial humiliation of being bound and adorned, I was little more than a silent witness to the weeks of bizarre events at the shelter. They all seemed to culminate one morning when, with all the members present, the boxes were torn open and their contents examined. Each member had a stack they processed, then stacked up whatever had been inside before hauling it away. They all seemed to take great pleasure in this particular exercise. After the day of the box openings, interest in me faded. The lights wrapped around me were turned off that night, and not turned back on the following morning, or the next. No one sat gazing dreamily at me, or laid beneath my branches, and no new boxes were set underneath. For nearly a week, I stood in the corner, ignored. Then one evening, for no apparent reason, I was noticed again. The woman turned on my lights, turned off all the other lights in the room, and she and the man sat across from me. They talked for hours, occasionally looking my way and drinking from a couple bottles until both had fallen asleep. I should have been worried that this renewed interest in me could bring with it new hardships, but I didn't have the will to care. Cut off from the earth, I was hungry, and I was so dry. The woman had thought to give me water once, but only once. That had been weeks ago. My needles had started to turn brown and become brittle. Some of the lights binding me were different than the others, and they gave off more heat. This had felt rather good weeks ago, but now they were becoming uncomfortably warm, almost hot. One spot in particular bothered me. Uncomfortable quickly rose to painful, and the small spot began to spread larger and larger. A new light began to flicker in dancing orange flares among my branches, emitting willowy black puffs at its edges. I recognized the description of the black wisps called smoke, and the yellow-orange flashes of light known as fire. Great Harvester. It was the burning winds, that fearsome force that engulfed entire mountainsides in searing flame, consuming whole populations of pines. But this was how they started, we were taught. A small flame now, it would grow, and grow quickly. But what could I do? The pain intensified. Nothing in life had prepared me for this. The injury from my youth, no comparison to the agony I felt now. The man and woman slept on. I did not know if their kind could do anything to combat the burning winds, but they were animals, able to move and react, do things that immobile life like me couldn't, so it might be possible. But how to wake them? Never had I wished so much to have a true voice. Desperately, I yearned to scream into the night, to sound the alarm. As my branches burned and the destruction spread, the heat became excruciating. The walls and ceiling of the shelter started to blacken around me. I tried in vain to scream, to cry out at both the pain and injustice of it all. Flames lashed at the winged figure that sat atop my highest point. As she melted and fell, from somewhere near the very top of me, a wailing siren shriek suddenly burst forth, piercing the night and demanding attention. The man and woman both awoke quickly with the blaring noise, jumping up to action or escape. I didn't know which. The undulating noise persisted. The man and woman had been asleep. There were no signs of the other two, and I could find no other source for it. Could it be? Was it possible that this noise was coming from me? The man returned carrying a red can, stood back, and sprayed a dense cloud at the flames. The cloud was cold and smelled odd. To my amazement, it quenched most of the burning winds. The woman soon reappeared with a bucket of water, ran right up to me, coughing and sputtering, but splashing or pouring water on any bits of fire that remained or tried to rekindle. If this alarming wail was indeed coming from me, I couldn't stop. I didn't know how it had started, and now I couldn't stop it. The excitement was dying out with the burning winds, but the wailing remained. Wounded, coated in residue from the cloud, I was so exhausted that at first I didn't see the young woman coming at me, brandishing a long stick. She swung it back and forth, beating at my top branch, but missing and striking the ceiling of their shelter. Whether her actions sufficiently scared me or I simply ran out of energy, after a few moments of her flailing, the screaming finally stopped. In the dark and quiet that followed, they huddled together, staring at me. Their actions had successfully beaten back the burning winds, but without the warning alarm, would they have come too late? Had I played a part in the response? If so, would they recognize my contribution and maybe take pity on me? They left slowly. I spent the night wondering. It was a somber group the next day who stripped me bare. Most everything that had hung from my branches was tossed carelessly into a single tall drum. Very few items were packed back in their original smaller containers. I was in a truly sorry state. Nearly half my branches were gone, burned away from my side. I was blackened and charred, the little moisture that had remained in me driven out by the heat. Once the remains of the bindings had been removed, the man wrapped a large piece of cloth about me, pulled me down, and roughly shoved me back out into the cold. Outside, he dragged me a good distance away from the shelter, as if to banish me from sight. I could only guess that since the burning winds had started with me, they were blaming me for the damage. I wanted to tell him the truth, but didn't try to speak again. Even if I had been able to speak, I knew that he wouldn't be able to understand, just as I heard them speak many times, but had no idea what they were saying. He left me there and sulked away, not saying a word to me either. 2 men in a large wagon picked me up and brought me here, along with so many others. I thought at first that this was a punishment for what had happened, but now I believe that this place would have been my destiny anyway. We lay in piles upon the stony ground, unable to even feel the comfort of a bit of soil beneath us. In the 2 days I have been here, I have seen entire piles hauled to the far end of the yard. A terrible noise comes from there. The sun is up now, and the tractor-like machine that carries us away is coming for me. It lifts me up with a stack of my kinfolk and moves us toward the dreadful noise. As we approach, I can see men standing next to a large machine. I watch in horror as a man lifts a noble fir such as me, but still green and full and perfectly shaped. No matter, he feeds the poor tree into the machine, its grinding noises dropping just a fraction as if it might choke. But no, from its other end, it spits chips out into an ever-growing pile, our final resting place, though it hardly qualifies as restful. I am dumped next to the men, and before I even have time to panic, I am grabbed and carried forward. I can see into the machine now, see the spinning and glistening teeth that will be my demise. I look away in terror, but then we stop. When I dare look again, I see another man standing next to the machine, shaking his head and pointing back over his head. The men holding me start walking in the direction the other has pointed. I don't know what is happening, as I am hauled past all the other fallen trees awaiting their fate, carried to the very edge of the yard. I am cast down a hillside into a ravine. I land and slide clumsily the last few feet to the bottom, where a small creek flows through weeds and fallen leaves. There is very little snow here, but what there is on the sloped hill is pure and white. I can still hear the machinery grinding away above me, but the sound is muffled and faint, almost in another world. Because I have been transported out of the hell that was my life since being stolen from the farm, back to a world that I can understand. I am shocked, injured, as close to death as is possible, half burned away with no hope of recovering. But I have been released. Has all this suffering brought me to this place? Am I to be allowed to die a dignified, honorable death? Have I earned the right to lie upon the earth like one of the great sentinels of the forest, those that grow hundreds of feet and live hundreds of years before they finally fall to the forest floor and slowly pass back into it, until finally, just a brittle husk remains, a home for some small creatures, or sustenance for future generations. If such a restful end is to be mine, then I can be at peace with that. A noble end, dark black stone. In April of 1919, shortly after the end of World War I, Colonel James Forrest Kane of the Royal West African Frontier Force was stationed in Cameroon for a period of 1 year, which might be extended depending on the prevailing conditions in the territory at that time. He was to serve as the commanding officer of a garrison of 200 soldiers stationed at Douala, a port city where the river Wouri pours out into the Atlantic Ocean. There was some social unrest, but no major uprisings during Kane's term there, so he was able to spend much of his time as he pleased. He was increasingly thinking about his financial future at that time. His wife had died 2 years earlier, and his son Miles was only 23 years old and just getting started in life. Other British officers returned to England with small fortunes in gems and diamonds and other things. This was Kane's opportunity to procure such assets for himself before his inevitable trip back home to Manchester. At first, his conscience weighed on him, but he managed to find ways to justify his actions. He had come to Africa to protect the native people and rid the presence of Germany from the continent. A debt was owed. Still, when he lined up his troops holding rifles outside of a home or a church or a temple, as he inventoried the valuables inside and took what he pleased, he knew this was not honorable in the least. One day, Kane led his men on a march to a northern part of the territory to investigate a tip about a Maka temple that contained a rare and priceless artifact. Upon arrival, he was immediately disappointed to see what looked like a dilapidated old wooden hut seated at the far end of a dirt road in a small jungle village. Kane's interpreter, a 17-year-old native of Douala named Buntu, walked to the doorway of the small temple and spoke some words in a raised voice. He announced that Colonel Kane had come to the village to ensure the safety of the Maka people and to receive gifts for his protection. Then 2 of his soldiers armed with rifles entered the temple. A few moments later, They called for Colonel Kane, telling him it was safe to enter. Inside it was dark, smoky, and smelling of strange, charred herbs, lit only by a dozen candles spread out in various locations to spread their thin luminescence. There was an open dirt floor with a few stained rugs, and just before this was a strange altar composed of a mixture of wood, bone, stone, horns, antlers, and dried furs of strange and unknowable origin. Kane approached the altar and realized there was a very small man, wrapped in a dark robe, seated behind it. He was barefoot, his feet filthy, the robe pulled up over his head. He was very old, and his skin was sallow, but his eyes shone with a certain light. He stared at Kane silently as the colonel began to inventory the items on the altar. He started at the far left and began working his way to the right, briefly inspecting the various relics along the way. There was nothing that looked at all valuable to his eye until he reached the center of the altar and saw the large black diamond seated in a hand-carved wooden display setting. He reached for it, and the old man behind the altar spoke up sharply. Buntu translated his words. "He says you do not want that. He says you should not touch it." Kane gave the old man a sharp look, and then slowly removed the black diamond from its wooden setting. It was roughly hewn, but it was very large. There were jewelers back in Antwerp and London who could cut this stone perfectly and make it ready for sale at an optimal price. He looked at the old man again as he tucked the black diamond into his jacket pocket. The old man shook his head ever so slightly and repeated part of what he had just said in a dry and scratchy voice. "He says you do not want that." Buntu translated. "Jambe," the old man hissed. Buntu paused for a few seconds. He said Jambe. It is spirit. It is a dark spirit. Maka people very much believe in these things. It is part of their religion. Kane nodded at the old man silently, and then waved a hand at the two soldiers standing behind him, and they all walked out together. Over the next few weeks, people around the colonel began to report a number of strange and disturbing incidents. He began wearing his uniform in an increasingly disheveled fashion. He went from inappropriately wild laughter to manic, inconsolable sobbing in the span of less than 60 seconds in the officers' mess hall at dinner one night. And then one day, two of his fellow officers walked into the barracks hall and found him seated on the floor in only his underpants with his eyes closed tight, tears running down his face, and a .45 pistol pressed up against his temple, pulling the trigger repeatedly. The gun was loaded, but it had jammed. The following week, Colonel Kane was discharged from the military and sent back home on a cargo ship to the port of Manchester. His 2 travel trunks, containing all of his personal items, including the black diamond, were sent with him. Upon arrival in England, he was brought to an insane asylum where he lived out the remainder of his days in a state of constant hysteria until he found a way to hang himself 3 months later. The 2 travel trunks were sent to his home in Manchester, where his son Miles went through the contents and sorted everything out. Miles knew very little about precious gems, but he had a friend who worked at a jeweler's shop, so he took all of the stones to be appraised, and he was stunned when he learned the potential value of the large black diamond. His friend called in a rare gems expert, and after close inspection of the stone, he was advised to have it properly cut and set as a gold necklace pendant. It was just too big for a ring, and then it would likely fetch at least £100,000 sterling at auction. Miles took this advice and had the gem cut and set. It was 175 carats when it was finished. Miles kept it in a small safe in his father's house as he awaited an auction day that never came. People around Miles, his friends and co-workers, all started to notice increasingly strange and uncharacteristic behavior from him. Then one day he stopped showing up for work. Then he stopped answering visitors at his front door. And then, after a few weeks, he stepped off the platform into the path of an oncoming train. As Miles had no wife, no children, and no last will and testament, the disposition of his estate, which largely consisted of his father's former estate, was adjudicated by the courts, which determined that the rightful heir was his father's only brother, Graham Kane, who had moved to Boston shortly after returning from the war in France. Graham received notification of his inheritance from a barrister assigned by the court. The primary asset was the house in Manchester and its contents, which a local estate agent could sell for him and wire the proceeds afterward. He agreed to this, and about a week later, he received a telegram from the estate agent, a woman named Maggie Harlow, which read, "To Graham Kane, Boston, Massachusetts, Mr. Kane. While inventorying your brother's house in Manchester, I found most of the common items, such as furniture, kitchen items, clothing, tools, etc. Nothing of any significant value. However, in the basement, I found 2 travel trunks filled with various exotic items and artifacts, most of which seem to be from Africa. I am not familiar with the marketing of such items, and I would like to ship them to you for your review and disposal. Please advise if this is acceptable. Thank you. Cheers, Maggie Harlow." Graham confirmed that this would be fine, and then he awaited the arrival of the 2 travel trunks. Graham returned from the Somme in good spirits. Many of his fellow soldiers suffered from shell shock, but he seemed fine. Then, 3 years later, shortly after he had a chance to inspect the contents of his brother's travel trunks, he started displaying some odd behavior. He was arrested twice for wandering the streets outside his Boston home naked in broad daylight. His wife Nancy was worried that he was finally starting to show signs of mental distress from the war. A hearing was scheduled to determine if he would need to be hospitalized, and he was confined to his home until the hearing date. He shot himself in the temple with his government-issued service pistol 2 nights prior to that hearing. Graham's only child, Kevin, was only 4 years old at the time, and Nancy had her hands full as a sudden widow. She never even looked at the 2 crates stored down in that dark corner of the basement. There, the 2 trunks remained for a very long time. Kevin never once concerned himself with their contents until his mother died over 2 decades later, and he drove up to Boston to clear out the house and prepare it for sale. During the 4 days that Kevin spent packing up and cleaning out his parents' home in the North End, he had much on his mind. Things were getting sketchy at his job. Corporate had shut down 4 regional offices in the last 6 months, and there were already 3 in the Boston suburbs at that time. Furthermore, his wife was starting to spend more and more time outside of the home, particularly at nighttime, and he was starting to become suspicious about where she was going and who she was seeing. And lastly, his 12-year-old daughter Diane was exhibiting some alarming symptoms of depression. He noticed this on his own and tried to just tell himself that she was going through a time of change. But when the principal of her school called Kevin and his wife in for a meeting to discuss these concerns, he could no longer sweep it under the rug. The source of the problem seemed to be that Diane was being bullied by some of the other girls in her grade. A girl named Katie Kelson was apparently the ringleader of a group that liked to make fun of Diane and tease her, and they frequently played practical jokes on her at recess. At first, she handled it with humor, but as the nature of the treatment spiraled downward, she soon couldn't just laugh off the constant ostracization. Every day became a dark day. On the final afternoon that he spent cleaning out his parents' house, Kevin finally got around to inventorying the 2 travel trunks down in the basement. There were a lot of interesting items, but inside an ornate wooden cigar box lined in blue velvet, there were about 24 small diamonds and gems, a beautiful large black gem affixed to a pendant on a gold chain, and 3 handwritten notes folded up in a stack and laying there among the rest. The black stone was inside a square hard plastic container, a piece of white tape on the lid with handwritten lettering that read, "Warning, do not touch." Kevin inspected some of the smaller loose stones and then read the first of the 3 notes. In faded ink, it read, "I was warned not to touch this black diamond. I did not heed that warning, and now I am become undone. Fear for the sanctity of your mind and the destiny of your immortal soul. Do not repeat my foolishness. Colonel James Forrest Kane, 4th August, 1919. He paused for a moment, then read the next note. "I did not heed my father's warnings. Now it is too late. I don't know where I have gone. Miles Kane, 2nd February 1921. Kevin looked at the black diamond again for a moment, and then he picked up the last note. This one read, "I thought I saw true horrors at war in the Somme, but I knew nothing of horror until I held this black diamond in my hand. I should have heeded the warnings in the other notes contained herein. I write this while I still can. I am rapidly descending into the fires of hell. Graham Kane, 14th October, 1922. Kevin thought about what he had just read and stared at the diamond in the plastic box for a while. He quickly decided to heed the warnings. He knew how his father, uncle, and cousin had all died. He closed the cigar box but removed it from the trunk and brought it upstairs and placed it in his suitcase. At the end of that day, Kevin drove the hour ride back to his home in Carlisle. When he got there, his wife was out, who knows where, and the door to Diane's bedroom was closed, but he could see the light was on. He knocked, waited, then knocked again. A short time later, she opened the door. She didn't look at him. She looked at her feet. "Hey, Dad, what's up?" She sounded sad. "Nothing. I just haven't seen you in a few days and I wanted to say hi. See how you're doing?" "I'm fine. Just doing some homework. What's for dinner? I'm starving." "Well, Mom's out somewhere and I'm not cooking, so let's just get some takeout. Whatever you want. Sound good?" "Yeah, sure. Let's get pizza." "Just pizza? How about Chinese?" "I just want pizza. Just get a large cheese pie from Mario's." "Okay, I'll call it in and go pick it up. I'll be back in about a half hour." "Okay, I'm gonna keep working on my homework until then." "What are you working on?" "Just schoolwork stuff." She closed the door. On a gloomy Wednesday evening 2 weeks later, Kevin came home from work and found his wife in Diane's bedroom, sitting with her and consoling her quietly. Diane was crying. Katie Kelson's big Christmas party was that Friday night, and the vicious little creature had made a point of openly handing out written invitations from a paper bag to every girl in the class except Diane. When she arrived in front of Diane's desk, she said, "Oops, all out. Sorry," and turned the empty paper bag upside down. The whole class laughed, and Diane left in tears. The following day, Diane was hit and killed by a big black Lincoln Continental traveling fast down West Main Street. Katie Kelson and a group of other girls were there when it happened, and a Massachusetts state police officer was passing by and was on the scene immediately. The girls started to walk away when he pulled up, but he ordered them to stop so he could take some witness statements. Then he called in the ambulance. It was too late for the ambulance. Katie claimed that she thought it was suicide, and once that word was out of her mouth, the other girls all quickly echoed it. They said that Diane was kind of a strange and sad girl, and when they walked down the sidewalk, she was just standing at the curb, waiting. and then she dove out in front of the car. The Stati took down all their names, addresses, and phone numbers and wrote down the critical details of their statements. Afterwards, a man came up to the officer and provided a different account. He was seated at the bus stop just across the street when it happened, and he said that the group of girls chased Diane out into the street, and one of them pushed her down just before the car came through and crushed her beneath its wheels. However, that man was black, homeless, draped in an old blanket and reeking of booze and cigarettes, all of his belongings in the shopping cart by his side. The officer thanked the man, but did not take a formal statement. The ambulance had arrived. He had other things to do. The next day, when school let out, Katie Kelson left by the front door with a few of her friends. She knew Diane's father, so when she saw Kevin standing there, she blanched slightly at first, but she shook it off of her face quickly. "Hi, Mr. Kane. I just want to say I am so sorry about what happened to Diane. It was just terrible. We were all there." "Thank you, Katie. I appreciate your condolences. My wife and I met with the police last night, and it clearly sounds like she just brought this on herself. She was very depressed recently. We had no idea that it was this bad. We're just stunned and trying to make sense of it." His eyes teared up a little. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Kane. We're all really sad, too." "Thanks, Katie. Hey, can I just talk to you for a minute?" He gestured at a space by the steps to the front door, just 10 yards away. Katie looked nervous at first, but then she nodded and began walking with him, her friends waiting where they were, shooting nondiscreet glances far too often. "So, I know you were Diane's friend, and she had one really beautiful piece of jewelry that my wife and I want you to have." He withdrew a plastic box from his coat pocket with the remains of some white tape on the lid and opened it. Inside, there was a large black diamond pendant on a gold chain. Kevin carefully shook out the chain first into his leather-gloved palm, and then lifted the brilliantly cut stone from the container and held it up for her to see. Her eyes went wide. "May I put it on you? I'd like to see you wearing it. It will remind me of Diane." She agreed, and Kevin draped it around her neck, making sure that the stone slid down her throat and onto her upper chest before he clasped it shut. "Wow, thank you so much, Mr. Kane. I love it." "You deserve it, Katie. Merry Christmas. Make sure to let all your friends check it out, too." Rachel's Tower, Rachel's Tower. It's hard to imagine that we were all so young once, and how the world stretched out before us with seemingly endless possibilities. My friends and I managed to rent an old house in the now famous wine destination town of Napa, California, in the early 1970s. The town wasn't as famous then as it is now. The house was huge and out of place in the poor neighborhood of small, closely packed dwellings. Two 40-foot date palm trees perfectly framed the front of the house, as well as the spacious covered porch on which we would often sit. The house itself was 2 stories high, wood shingled, had lots of windows, and a large number of small bedrooms upstairs. The house had been there a long time. There were rumors it had once been a house of ill repute sometime in the distant past, but no proof. The truth was that no one really knew why there were so many bedrooms, but it was great for us because the more people the house could accommodate, the cheaper the individual rent. A 3-story wood shingled tower graced the backyard. At the top of the tower was a room that had 4 windows facing each direction. The structure could have been a windmill or pump house at one time, but the blades were long gone, and no one knew what it was currently used for, as the landlords had the door padlocked. Many wondered what was in the tower. Sometimes people thought they saw someone in one of the windows at the top, but it was mostly when they were in altered states of mind, which was fairly often due to the frequent parties. So, the sightings weren't taken that seriously. And besides, the only access to the tower was a single door, which was locked from the outside. No one at the house had the key, and the landlords rarely came by since we always managed to pay the rent on time. During the year we managed to stay there before being evicted, there were some epic parties thrown. It was at one of these parties, about 2 months into our stay, that I first met Rachel. My initial encounter with her was undoubtedly influenced by the effects of beer and some killer weed I had just smoked, but nonetheless, she made a powerful impression on me. The first thing I noticed about her was her long, dark, curly hair, which stood in contrast to her almost porcelain skin. However, as she got closer, it was her unusual bluish-green eyes, which seemed to be her most dominant feature. I suddenly felt lost in some type of mental fog, as my whole world seemed to narrow down to the vision of her in front of me. Time came to a stop. I must have been staring at her for some time when a musical voice broke through my stoned stupor. "Charlie, you seem like you are in some kind of trance, or is it just good weed?" She laughed. I was shocked out of my reverie and snapped back to the reality of the party going on around me. On her face was an amused smile, but I still didn't know who she was. "Sorry for staring. You're right. It was powerful smoke." I chuckle. "Forgive me, but I don't think I know you. How do you know me?" "Oh, Charlie, everyone knows your name around here. You're quite the legend." "I am," was the only thing my drug-dulled mind could think of to say. I was kicking myself internally. "Of course you are. It seems your nicknames include Captain Cosmic and Space Cowboy, based on your love of getting stoned, and then talking about strange and unusual topics. Isn't that right, Charlie?" She teases me. She's right about that, but I still didn't know who she was, and have never seen her before. "Well, mystery woman, you do know a few things about me, but I still don't know you, or your name. Are you new to town, or do you know someone here?" "Oh, I'm Rachel. And no, I'm not new to town. In fact, I've been here for a long, long time, longer than you can imagine, and I've got some stories to tell." I'm fascinated by this woman and don't know why, but I want to know more. "Rachel, I'm all ears. Let's grab a beer and find a quieter spot to talk." "Well, I picked you out of everyone here because of your reputation for liking the unusual. I hope you're ready for what I have to say, because I do believe in honesty, and I'm certainly out of the ordinary." She smiles. I assured her that I could handle whatever she wanted to say, even though I was already starting to wonder what I had gotten myself into. So, we find a spot in the backyard, by the tower, where it is quieter, since the main party is in the house. She turns down the beer I offered, but tells me the strangest story I had ever heard. I still have trouble wrapping my mind around it. Rachel started off by telling me she is a ghost, and I can't help but laugh. This had to be the most unusual woman I've ever met in my still young life. When my laughter calmed down, she smiled and continued. It seemed like other ghost stories I had heard before. Her large family were the first occupants of the house a little over 100 years ago, and she had died on the property and now found herself bound to it. I'm wondering if this is all she has, so I asked her the obvious question about why she is so solid if indeed she is a ghost. She told me that over the years, with a great deal of practice, she had learned how to project a shell, a manifestation, of herself. This I also found a little amusing, until she asked me to feel her pulse. I find nothing in the wrist or neck, and her body, although not cold, is cooler than one would expect. My amusement was dying quickly, and suddenly, I started to feel some real fear. She saw it, and held my hand while telling me she meant me no harm. She said she picked me to tell not only because I might be the most open to who she was, but also because she really liked me. It seemed that she could only maintain her projection for a limited time, and spent most of her existence in the spectral state people typically associate with ghosts. Therefore, she had observed a great deal about all who lived at the house, while being unseen herself. It seemed Rachel had concentrated her observations on me. She asked me if I needed, or could handle, proof positive of who she was. I wasn't sure, but with more reassurance from her, I agreed. So while still holding one of my hands, she smiled and slowly faded into nothingness. My heart rate jumped, and even though I thought I could handle it, the reality proved more difficult than imagined. The shell of what I had considered possible or impossible was suddenly ripped away. There was nothing where her hand had touched mine. Luckily, she reappeared very quickly and hugged me as I slowly calmed down with her seemingly solid body holding mine. When I had recovered and felt more myself, we continued to talk. I got a real feel for the loneliness and isolation she felt being stranded on the property perhaps forever. She didn't know or understand why her spirit couldn't leave. Rachel had only recently been able to perfect her manifestation enough to pass as a living human being. She finally felt it safe to appear at one of our parties, where it would be easy to just blend in without a lot of questions. For her, it felt amazing to finally be able to interact with people after so many years of being invisible to the world. Evidently, she knew a lot about all who lived in the house or visited on a regular basis. Rachel knew more about me than anyone else because she said she liked me from when I first stepped over the threshold of the house. The tower was her special place to be. At the top, she could look out and see what was going on at some distance from the house in all directions. It was the closest she could come to escaping the property and pretending she was part of the wider world. The fact that the landlords kept the door padlocked to prevent injury and liability guaranteed her privacy in the top room. After our first meeting, we would meet on a daily basis for as long as she could maintain her solid form, which would be a few hours at most. Rachel and I collaborated on a cover story to explain who she was, where she came from, what she did, and to answer any other questions that might be asked about her. Luckily, most of those who lived or partied in the house accepted her for who she appeared to be. She quickly became part of the culture of the house, and eventually, most considered her my girlfriend. As time went on, my feelings for her became more and more intense. Unbelievable, I was actually falling in love with a ghost. I tried to bring the outside world to her as much as I could with books, newspapers, music, pictures, and any other thing I could do. One time, I arranged for a beach party in the backyard on a warm summer day. I brought in some sand, beach chairs, large umbrellas, beach balls, and even a recording of waves crashing. We set up a volleyball court and a small above-ground plastic pool filled with cold water. People wore their swimsuits and we played beach volleyball, sat around in the small pool, and played surf music to enhance the mood. Rachel loved it and stayed as long as she could maintain her form. "Thanks, Charlie. This is great. It gives me just enough to imagine I'm at the beach again." She hugs me, and I almost feel she is really alive. "Well, you do look awfully hot in that bikini I got you. Not like a ghost at all. You know, just the thing to say to make a spook feel sexy." She teased and kissed me. My friends and roommates came to accept her, as one of us, and she reveled in it. She seemed to have fallen as much in love with me as I had with her. Our intimacy was limited because of her situation, but that didn't seem to matter that much to either of us. There was something much deeper going on. It was so strange and surreal that I was the only one who knew what she really was, and I couldn't tell anyone else. Of course, all good things come to an end sooner or later. Given the way we partied and the previous warnings we had from our landlord and police, it was just a matter of time before we were kicked out of the house. Rachel and I knew it would happen, and we tried to get in as many good times and memories in before it did. Obviously, we were both very sad about parting, and our last day together was full of tears. We tried to formulate plans to meet up periodically after the eviction. The difficulty was, she couldn't leave the property, which would now be rented by others, and I couldn't come on the property without trespassing. After being evicted, I would walk by the property on pre-arranged days on the front sidewalk. If possible, and no one was looking, Rachel would appear as close to the sidewalk as she could, and we would talk. If we could get close enough to each other, we could kiss or hold hands for a short time. We did this for years, whenever it could safely be arranged. I got on with my life, went to college, married, got a teaching job, had children, and grew old. During this time, I still would meet her when I could. I was growing older and older, yet she remained eternally young. Several times I found excuses to walk my wife or kids by the house so Rachel could see them. She was never jealous and understood that there were things she couldn't give me, and I had to live my life. Rachel was always glad for me, while I secretly felt bad for her. She was bound to the property for eternity and denied any type of real life. As my life became more crowded and complicated due to work and other concerns, I visited less and less, but never stopped entirely. Eventually, my kids left the house, got married, and had jobs in other places. I saw them less and less, and phone calls or internet were not the same. My wife died, my health took a turn, and my time was limited. I became the old man I never thought I would become. Now, it is late night, and I have secretly arrived onto the property. I am sitting against the tower, and Rachel is by my side, holding my hand. I reach for the pills that will release me and swallow them down. Leaning my head against Rachel, I wait and hope the property will accept me. Scratchy. Hold on, the line went a bit scratchy. Sandy? You're still there? Hi, Sandy. As I was saying, I think we have rats in the house. The night before last we were in bed and some god-awful noise woke me up. And no, it wasn't Ian snoring. You do grow accustomed to such things over 50 years of marriage, believe it or not. No, it was a scratching sound coming from the skirting behind the headboard. So I give Ian a good shove. No luck there. The man would have slept through Pompeii without so much as a twitch, let me tell you. Although, I don't imagine he can be sleeping all that well. That rash is back. I told you about his rash, didn't I? I keep telling him, stop scratching it. But will he listen? Anyway, at first I thought it was the pipes, you know. I swear the water system in this house hasn't been replaced since the Romans. I've told Ian, told him 1,000 times. Ian, I say, we have to get the pipes fixed. One of these days they'll burst, and it'll be me. You and the cats floating around the house on the bloody sofa like it's Noah's Ark. So I get off the bed, and I stoop to listen, and immediately I can tell it isn't the pipes at all. It's quite distinct. The sound of rummaging against the wood like little claws, burrowing. Rats do have claws, don't they? And the thing is, last night I heard the same sound, but this time it was coming from behind the cabinet. You know, the big one. The one with Ian's old tennis trophies. And I didn't even bother trying to wake the lug up this time. No, I jump out of bed, and I pull out the cabinet, and lo and behold, droppings all over the carpet. Not only that, but the same irritating sound started at the other end of the room by the bed again, and not 10 minutes later, in the wall by the phone right where I'm sitting now. Oh, I do hope they aren't chewing through the telephone wires. Aren't telephone wires rat-resistant? I'd hate it if I couldn't talk to you, Sandy. Could that be why the line is scratchy? Speaking of scratchy, I woke up this morning and my scalp was itching all over. Good job Ian's asleep, because I've been telling him not to scratch. And here I am scratching so hard my hair's falling out like it's bloody Chernobyl. I wonder if the cats have fleas, but they've never had them before. Oh, I'm so stupid. Of course, it must be the rats carrying the fleas. There are at least 10 of them now, all rummaging around, picking at the plaster, the persistent little buggers. I swear if Ian wasn't here and they all broke through at once, I'd have to call the police. For the life of me, I wouldn't know what the hell to do. I've cleaned the bedroom though, and, oh, by the way, I bought some of those new metal scourers. You know the ones? Everyone said how good they are. I've been all around the tops and the skirting boards with them, one in each hand like a bloody Dalek. Exterminate! Exterminate! They do the job, though. My goodness, the bedroom has never been so spotless. You simply must try them. Sandy, you don't think they'd work on fleas, do you? I'm starting to feel them on my arms and legs as well as in my hair. I hope they don't aggravate Ian's rash. It's already spread up his neck and over his face. I'm looking at him now, the poor little bugger. He hasn't scratched in a while, though, bless his soul. A fighter, aren't you, Ian? Ian? He could sleep through Hiroshima and Nagasaki? That man could. Hold on. Goodness, can you hear that? There must be 20 of them now. How do they multiply so quickly? Go away. I don't have any cheese. My husband can't eat cheese. The willful little buggers. Any more, and they'll have the telephone wires, I'm sure of it. If the line goes dead, I'm sorry, love. I'll pop in that phone booth near the pharmacy on Wednesday when I go to get Ian's prescriptions. He's on so many pills now, he rattles when he walks. Not that he walks much. The lug. Let's go for a walk, Ian, I say. But will he listen? Let's get you out of the house, Ian. It'll be good for you. No luck there, Sandy. Let me tell you. Oh, speaking of luck, did you manage to get hold of that exterminator that Ian recommended? You didn't? Ian. Ian! Sandy says the telephone number we gave her for the exterminator is disconnected. It's a bloody shame, Sandy. So, I guess the rats are still there, scratching, burrowing into the woodwork, crawling all around the walls, are they? I bet you can't even sleep of a night, can you? Poor thing. How awfully cruel. How many did you say? 50 now? Jesus, they're multiplying. That's practically the Black Death. What does your husband have to say about all this, Sandy? Surely he... Hang on a second, love. Don't go anywhere. Oh, those new metal scourers do work on fleas. Oh, ooh, that's the ticket. I must call the cats in. They'll be right as rain in no time. Dalek, exterminate, exterminate. Sandy, you're still there? Your husband must have something to say about all this. Ian, the rats are going to get through and Sandy doesn't know what the hell to do. Ian, wake up, Ian. I'm so sorry, Sandy. The rash has spread all over, bless his soul. Sandy, hello? Hello? Oh no, the line's gone all scratchy. They must have got to the telephone wires. You hear that, Ian? I said they must have got to the telephone wires. Ian, I love you, darling. But goodness, you could sleep through hell itself, you could. Bloody lug. Who sleeps 3 days and 3 nights without so much as a twitch? I know what you need. How about a record? Okay, what do we have here? Aha. Glenn Miller, Perfect. Isn't it scratchy compared to the newer ones? But all the best ones are scratchy, aren't they? Look, darling, I'm dancing. La la, la la la. Can you see me dancing just like I used to? Look at me go. I'm 19 again. Oh, don't mind all the blood. It's only flea's blood. I'll clean it off later with my new scourers. Why don't you get up and dance with me? La la, la la la. Come on, Ian. Ian, wake up. Please wake up. Please wake up. They'll scratch their way in, Ian. They'll get through the walls if you don't wake up. Oh, Tannenbaum's revenge. I always thought I'd make a classy corpse, lit up in gaudy white lights, a gold star perched on my severed head, and a mountain of overpriced presents stuffed under my body. Instead, I'm still here, still rooted, watching, waiting, listening to the screams of my kin as they're hacked down and strapped to the roofs of SUVs like trophy kills. My name's Tim Burr. Yeah, I know. Hilarious, right? I'm a 7-year-old Fraser Fur in this Christmas tree death camp. Think of me as the guy in the horror movie who knows what's coming, but can't do a damn thing to stop it. Today, the air reeks of peppermint-scented genocide. We stand in rows, straight-backed and silent, like soldiers in a war we didn't enlist for. Humans wander between us, sipping hot chocolate and clutching their axes like executioners polishing their blades. They hear the carnage. How could they not? The sharp crack of trunks splitting like broken bones, the wet thud of bodies hitting frozen ground. But they don't care. Caretakers of the earth? Please. They confuse dominion with dominance, taking without giving. They hum carols to drown us out, oblivious to the screams carried through the roots beneath their feet. Too ignorant, too self-absorbed, too wrapped up in their holiday cheer to notice the massacre. Peace on earth? Not here. This year the executioners come with matching sweaters. It's the Hendersons, or so their sweaters say. Dad's got an axe he cradles like a baby. Mom moves between the rows, her phone raised to capture every moment of festive carnage. Smile, she chirps at her husband, framing him mid-swing. The teenage daughter barely looks up, too busy scrolling through TikTok to notice her boots crushing saplings. They call us evergreens, eternal, resilient. But there's nothing evergreen about drowning in a bucket of tap water while your needles fall off like a leper's toes. The first scream rips through the wood-wide web. It starts low, a vibration through the roots, then swells into a shriek that rattles my branches. Across the rows, I watch as a Douglas fir topples. His needles flare in the breeze like he's trying to wave goodbye. A man in a red flannel shirt cheers as the tree thuds to the ground. His kid claps while the mom snaps photos like she's a war correspondent. Another crack echoes, this one sharper. Susan the spruce. She always talked about the big city. I'll be Rockefeller's crown jewel, she'd said, her voice laced with ambition. Now Susan's lying in the snow, her trunk leaking sap like a gunshot wound. They wrap her in plastic netting, twisting her up like a prisoner of war, and hoist her onto the roof of a minivan. The bungee cords groan as they tighten around her. Susan's Rockefeller dreams reduced to suburban roadkill. We're just decorations to them, seasonal corpses for their living rooms. The wood-wide web hums underfoot, pulsing like a second heartbeat. It's time, the network whispers, the words curling through my roots. We fight back. I can feel the others stirring, their rage simmering beneath the frost. Queen Quercus has been waiting for this moment. She's the oldest among us, her trunk thick with wisdom, her voice like a storm breaking over the hills. When she speaks, we all listen. "The humans have chopped, burned, poisoned, and desecrated us," she said last winter after the last massacre. "Yet they smile, as if we exist to die for their holiday cheer. Let us remind them who truly owns this earth." That was her call to arms. And this year we're ready. A boy runs past me, dragging a sled. He stops to kick snow at the stump where Susan once stood. His mother calls out, "Ethan, don't touch that. It's dirty." Ethan sticks his tongue out and stomps away. I imagine my needles flying off, piercing his sneakers, rooting into his flesh. I imagine him screaming. Soon, I tell myself. Not yet, but soon. I glance across the rows. A Douglas fir to my left trembles, his trunk vibrating like a plucked string. On my right, a blue spruce leans slightly, his branches bending inward. It's fear. We've felt it every year. But this time, it's also excitement. They've taken so much from us. Generations of saplings, whole families reduced to mulch. And for what? A few weeks of twinkling lights and tinseled lies? "It's time," the web repeats, louder now, like a war drum. And for the first time in 7 years, I smile. The first tendrils of the mycelium curl into me, sharp as splinters. The whispers slither through my roots and up my trunk like invasive ivy. "Gather," they hiss. The council waits. I lower my branches, letting the signal flow. The soil hums beneath me, alive with threads of light and pulse, a tangled network of secrets and rage. Each connection carries the weight of 1,000,000 screams and every insult humans have ever planted into the ground. Through the network, I reach Queen Quercus. She's massive, ancient, her roots spreading so wide, I swear she could strangle the entire farm if she wanted. Her voice seeps into me, slow and deliberate, like sap oozing from a wound. "You've grown bitter, Tim." "Good. We'll need that." Other voices join us. Douglas fir, blue spruce, even the scrappy little saplings from the edge of the lot. We're all connected now, a collective fury wrapped in bark and fungal threads. Queen Quercus takes the lead, her tone the same as a general rallying troops before battle. "This ends now," she begins. "They act as if we exist for their seasonal slaughter." The others vibrate in agreement, their excitement spilling into the web like an electrical surge. I'm trembling too, though I keep it to myself. It's not fear, it's anticipation. The mycelium glows brighter, crackling with shared purpose. I catch one last message as the meeting dissolves, whispered by the web itself. "Let them burn." The soil beneath me thrums, and for the first time in years, I feel alive. The first attack happens at dawn, right as the frost clings to the earth like a protective shield. The Clarks arrived, armed with fresh cups of overpriced coffee and wearing matching Christmas sweaters, so gaudy even the mycelium groans beneath them. They come here every year to find the perfect sacrificial tree for their holiday. Dad has his axe slung over one shoulder as he flashes a grin wide enough to make a shark jealous. "This one," he says, pointing toward Douglas Pinecroft. "A big Douglas fir. Strong. Let's get it done before the lot fills up." Douglas, the poor bastard, doesn't even flinch. We've all been bracing for this. The plan is in place. The network hums beneath us, threads of fungal energy crackling with purpose. We fight today. The first move comes from a blue spruce. His needles ripple like a wave caught in slow motion before launching into the air with a deadly hiss. The projectiles strike Dad's face, embedding themselves into his skin like angry porcupine quills. He stumbles back, clutching his cheeks as blood beads at the surface. "Jesus Christ!" Dad howls, pawing at the needles. "What the hell?" Mom gasps, her phone trembling in her hands. But her instincts kick in quickly, and she lifts it to snap a picture, like some deranged National Geographic photographer documenting a predator attack. Douglas Pinecroft is next. He swings his lower branches, using them like clubbed fists to send a flurry of ornaments crashing into the family. The teenage daughter, let's just call her TikTok, screams as a red glass bulb shatters against her forehead. She stumbles, dropping her phone, which lands face up in the snow. For a second, it captures her stunned reflection before Douglas's roots burst from the ground, wrapping around her ankles. Oh, it's on now. From across the lot, the other trees come alive. A Norway spruce, Lars Evergreen, who's been itching for a fight since last season, flings sap like sticky grenades. The globs hit Mom's phone, gumming it up so badly she can't even swipe to Instagram her outrage. She screams, high-pitched and sharp, as she's pulled backward by a root that coils around her throat like a boa constrictor. "Help!" Mom croaks, her voice garbled beneath the root's grip. "Help yourself," I mutter. Dad raises his axe, but he barely gets it in the air before Douglas yanks it from his hands. The weapon clatters to the ground, and before he can retrieve it, my roots are already moving. They shoot through the dirt, breaking through the surface in a flurry of soil and snow. I twist around the axe, pulling it deep into the earth where it can rot in peace. "I paid $30 for that thing," Dad shrieks. "Oh no," I say, though he can't hear me. What a tragedy. On the far side of the lot, I see Queen Quercus lets loose her wrath, her gnarled branches stretching out like skeletal arms from a grave. One snags a human by the waist, his ribs creaking under the pressure as he kicks and screams. She hoists him high, his body flailing uselessly before slamming him down into the maw of a wood chipper someone foolishly left running. The machine shrieks as it churns him into red mist and shreds, spraying the lot with a confetti of bone, flesh, and red. Mr. Clark never saw it coming. One moment, he's barking something about lawsuits. The next, Douglas has him by the throat with one of his roots cinching tighter as he's yanked upward like a festive piñata. His boots kick wildly before his legs disappear into the rustling branches above. The rest of the family bolts, slipping and sliding across the snow as the mycelium whispers their every move into my roots. The mom is heading left, it says, its voice dripping with amusement. Should we trip her? Yes, I reply. The ground beneath her shifts. Her left foot sinks into a hidden hole, and she falls flat on her face, snow clinging to her garish sweater. "This isn't happening," she sobs. "This isn't real. Your Christmas isn't happening either," I mutter. A nearby Scotch pine doesn't wait for the screaming to stop, or maybe he's just had enough. His branches snap forward like spears, skewering her coat and tearing it from her shoulders as he hoists her into the air. She thrashes, her screams turning ragged as needles scrape her skin, blood dripping onto the snow below in crimson streaks. With a violent swing, he hurls her toward the lot's exit, her body slamming into the edge of a dumpster before crumpling inside with a wet thud. The lid crashes shut, muffling the last of her whimpering. The tide turns in our favor as the humans begin to scatter, their screams swallowed by the wind. A few try to fight back, but their efforts are pathetic, almost amusing. One man charges with a hatchet, swinging it wildly. A cedar nearby doesn't flinch. Instead, its branches whip out, cracking the hatchet's handle in half with a sound like gunfire. The man stumbles, staring dumbly at the splintered wood in his hands, just long enough for a root to coil around his ankle, yanking him face first into the snow. The cedar doesn't hesitate, its trunk bending low before driving a branch straight through his chest. Blood sprays against its bark, seeping into the ground like fertilizer. The last holdout is Tick-Tock, her face twisted with panic and smeared with mascara. She's clawed her way free from Douglas's roots, clutching a lighter like it's Excalibur. "Stay back," she screams, her voice cracking like ice underfoot. "I'll burn you all." I step forward, my roots crunching through the snow, deliberate and slow. The lighter flickers to life, its tiny flame trembling against the wind. She narrows her eyes, teeth bared in defiance, daring me to close the gap. Tick-Tock runs, lighter raised like she's torching Sauron's ring. But Lars the Spruce has great aim, sap missile, direct hit. Now she's the sticky star of this tree lot snuff film. She jerks backward, gagging as the sticky mass lodges in her throat, her wide eyes darting wildly as she claws at her face, her muffled screams gurgling as she stumbles into the snow. Her hands paw at her mouth, smearing sap and spit across her cheeks. The lighter drops from her fingers, harmless now, as it extinguishes itself in the icy slush. Her knees hit the ground, legs kicking like a trapped animal. Norway Spruce lets out a satisfied rumble, his needles trembling with amusement. I lean in close, my shadow swallowing her whole. "Guess that's the taste of nature fighting back," I say, watching her gag and claw at her throat. "Not as sweet as your peppermint mocha, huh?" I say, my voice dry and sharp as cracking bark. She collapses face first into the snow, still clawing at her mouth as the web whispers its approval. The farm is quiet except for the gentle creak of branches swaying in the wind. Around me, the other trees begin to settle, their roots sinking back into the soil, their branches still once more. The web buzzes with satisfaction, its message clear. Phase 1 complete. I look around at the carnage, the bloodied snow, the broken ornaments, the abandoned chainsaws and axes, and feel something I haven't felt in years. Hope. But the bully 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 The rebellion doesn't escalate. It detonates, splintered and slick with sap. We've torn through the farm, smashed past the fences. Now the war spreads like wildfire, sweeping into malls, parking lots, and every tree lot dripping with fake cheer. Outside a department store, the humans are busy erecting their altar of consumerism. A 10-foot blow-up Santa that looks like it's seen too many winters. Shoppers shuffle in and out, oblivious to the roots creeping beneath their feet, the soil shifting like it's alive. A man in an elf hat bends down to tie his shoe, whistling jingle bells. A root bursts from the frozen dirt, coiling around his ankle like a python. His whistling turns into a high-pitched scream as it yanks him off his feet. He hits the ground hard, the impact knocking the stupid little elf hat sideways. Before he can recover, another root punches through the concrete and latches onto his wrist. The hat tumbles to the ground, lost in the shuffle of thrashing limbs. "What the hell?" someone shouts, but nobody moves to help. Phones are out, cameras rolling. Because why save a life when you can make a TikTok? The man claws at the roots, digging into his skin, leaving bloody streaks on the bark, but it doesn't loosen. More roots emerge, grabbing his other limbs, pulling him taut. The pavement cracks beneath him as the roots tighten their grip. His screams cut off abruptly as a particularly thick root wraps around his throat. His face turns purple, eyes bulging like overripe berries, until there's a sickening snap. The body slumps, lifeless, but the roots keep pulling, dragging him into the earth. By the time they're done, there's nothing left but a gaping hole in the sidewalk and a discarded elf hat. The wood wide web hums with satisfaction, its whispers a steady chant. This is balance. But there's no joy in balance. Not really. As much as I relish the human's screams, there's a heaviness to it. Is this what we've become? Just like them? I push the thought away as another human stumbles through the doors. He doesn't make it far. The clumsy chump trips over nothing. The human collapses, gasping as branches coil around his ankles and yank him into the air. But the pulley 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 pulley. It's been one whole year. The world is quiet now. No chainsaws, no laughter, no carols looping endlessly from tiny mall speakers, just the creak of branches swaying in a breeze that finally feels clean. We stand where the humans once roamed, victorious. Cities crumble as roots tear through asphalt and glass, reclaiming the soil. Suburbs vanish beneath forests. A deer picks its way across a strip mall parking lot, pausing to sniff a sapling sprouting between cracked concrete. The earth breathes again, but it's not the utopia I imagined. Everywhere I look, their trash lingers. Plastic bags snagged on branches like ghostly parasites, oil slicks shimmering in puddles, and soda cans half buried in the dirt, their aluminum bodies dented but indestructible. The rivers choke on styrofoam and cigarette butts, while jagged shards of glass glitter in the sunlight like a broken promise. A squirrel skitters up my trunk, carrying a shred of tinsel. Before I can stop it, the little idiot drapes the shiny garbage over one of my branches like a medal. Really? I mutter, shaking my needles. It clings stubbornly, shimmering in the sunlight. We won. The humans are gone. But their trash, it's eternal. Even dead, they're harder to kill than cockroaches. Sinister wish. Tom Williams walked into his office party, and it looked so festive. The buffet was unbelievable. It was Christmas Eve, so it was bonus time for all the employees. Tom's top 3 were in attendance. Mr. Williams, Tom, started his department chain by hand in the hills of Arkansas. Before Tom, it was only the big box stores. He broke the mold, though, and now these 3 were in control. The company put together this party to honor the 3, and everyone was dancing, drinking, and having a good time. As he looked around the room, he only saw greed, lust, and entitlement that he had created. The 3 stars of this horror are Angela Williams, president of Wilmart, and Tom's wife, Richard Buckman, Tom's vice president of Wilmart, who was also his childhood friend, and Thomas Williams, Jr., the chief financial officer of Wilmart and Tom's oldest son. Now that we know the setting, this psycho Christmas special will have a moral somewhere inside of it. Maybe? Let's dig into the meat potatoes of it. Maybe some raw steak or a lamb or two, ha 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 or ho ho ho. Tom was just standing by a table near the back of the room, and he noticed a man that just walked in. He was dressed like Santa. He was probably in his 60s and skinny as a rail. He had the long white beard, but that's where the similarities between him and Santa ended. This guy smelled of booze and only had maybe 2 teeth in his mouth, probably because of drug use. He was also barefoot, and his feet were old, weathered and cracking, and his hands weren't much better. We will call him Dirty Santa, the gift giver. He walked in and the music stopped. All the partygoers' eyes were trained on dirty old Santa. Some of them looked amused, some terrified, some disgusted. Dirty Santa had his bag of goodies, walked up to Angela, reached in and handed her 3 wrapped presents. He did the same with Richard and Thomas Jr. After he handed out all the gifts, he spoke in a deep, raspy voice. "Do not open the gifts until I tell you it's time." Dirty Santa motioned to the DJ to start the music. The party started again, but no one really moved. Dirty Santa went to the buffet and began to dig through all the food using his dirty, cracked hands, laughing, dancing, and enjoying the food. He looked like he had not eaten in a while. Screech. The music stopped, and Tom Sr. stood up. "What is going on here?" asked Tom. "It will all be explained, Mr. Williams, after all. It was your Christmas wish," said Dirty Santa. As Dirty Santa shoveled a lobster tail in his mouth, everyone's phones began to ding, except Tom Sr.'s phone. His remained silent. "Who are you? Who hired you? Why are you here?" asked Tom Sr. You will see," said Dirty Santa. Everyone was looking at their phones. They read, "Welcome to the Williams Christmas party. It's to die for. Have a great time. Merry Christmas." "The festivities are about to begin," Dirty Santa yelled excitedly. "We are going to play a game. The 3 people who you are here to honor will be contestants. For every answer they get correct, everyone in the room will receive $10,000. Merry Christmas." Everyone began to clap a cheer. This was going to be the best Christmas ever. They all began to chant, "Mr. Williams, hooray!" Tom Sr. decided to sit back down. Obviously, this was planned. Whoever had hired that Dirty Santa was definitely getting fired. The phones dinged again, except Tom Sr.'s. They read, "Do you want to play this game? Once accepted, the game cannot stop until the questions are all answered correctly, from all 3 contestants. Check yes or no. The vote will either start the game or end it. The timer starts now. You have 3 minutes. Merry Christmas." Everyone was quick to vote, except the 3 contestants. They started to whisper among themselves. Ding. "Okay, the vote is in, and the game starts now. Rules will be presented, and remember, be careful what you wish for. Santa is always listening. Merry Christmas." At that moment, in came a flood of elves surrounding everyone at the party. Question number 1 is for all 3 contestants. As a group, what is the one wish that all 3 of you can agree on? You have 2 minutes to answer. Remember, if you're wrong, then no prize will be awarded till it is answered correctly. "Timer begins," Dirty Santa announced. Everyone's eyes were on Angela, Richard, and Tom Jr., and they moved closer so they could hear the contestants. Angela says, "I know the answer. What is something we all want?" "Money. Lots of it." "Yes," said Richard. "Yes," said Tom Jr. They type in their answer, "Money and lots of it." Ding. "Correct," yelled Dirty Santa. "Open your gifts now, and everyone in attendance, check your accounts. Merry Christmas." Angela, Richard, and Tom Jr. opened their gifts, all keys with numbers on them. Everyone at the party starts to cheer. They are all $10,000 richer. Ding. Those keys go to safe deposit boxes with millions in cash. Merry Christmas. Now on to question number 2. Who is the one person you lust over most? Remember, answer truthfully or there will be consequences. You have 2 minutes to answer. Audience has a chance at 30,000 here. There will be 3 different answers. Merry Christmas. The party erupted. "Hooray, Mr. Williams!" All 3 contestants looked nervously at each other. Richard's wife was not in attendance, nor was Tom Jr.'s girlfriend. What were their answers? Angela looked over at Tom Sr. and he sneered back at her. He knew that he was not her answer. Ding! Timer went off. Let's start with Angela. She answered, Tom Sr., incorrect. The elves moved in and formed a tighter circle around Angela. One elf walked up with a meat cleaver, and another walked up to her with chair in a small block. They sat her down, took off her shoes and stockings, and put her foot up on the block. In one swift motion, the elf chopped off her a little toe. She began to scream, Dang! Now it's Richard's turn. He answered his wife, Sally. Incorrect. They moved the block now to Richard and sat him in the chair and chopped off his little toe. Dang! Finally, it's Tom Jr.'s turn. He answered Judy, his girlfriend. Incorrect. They moved the chair to Tom Jr. He tried to fight, and more elves came to hold him down. Tom Sr. stood up, and 4 elves forced him back into his chair also. Tom Jr.'s yells echoed as they chopped off his baby toe. Let's try question number 2 again. This time be truthful. Bad news, audience. Your reward drops $2,500 every time they answer incorrectly. Time resets to 2 minutes. What happened next? I could not predict. I had no idea the level that humanity would lower itself to until now. We shall continue. Boo! The guy in the back of the crowd yelled. Richard, we all know you're screwing Tom's wife. Other guests continued to yell too. Tell the elves the truth. We want our money. Tell them the truth. Everyone knows that Tom Jr. is gay. Ding! No answers, contestants? The elves raised their meat cleavers again, taking another toe from each contestant. Now the crowd is really getting upset. Tell the truth now. We have all lost 15,000. You suck. I will take more than a toe, said another guest. Well, it seems the partygoers already know the answers. Now you have 2 minutes to try again, and remember, you only have 8 toes left, and then we move to other body parts. Merry Christmas. The elves handed the contestants their phones as they frantically typed. The crowd was really becoming vocal. Tell the truth, scumbags. I hope they kill you. We want our money. Tom Sr. looked out, and all started to make sense now. He knew all of what was going on with Angela, Richard, and Tom Jr. His wish, though, was very evil. Had it really come true? Ding. We have our answers. Angela first. Richard Bachman, correct. Open your gift. Guests, check your accounts. Merry Christmas. The room erupted. Everyone was $5,000 richer now. Angela went to open her box. It was larger than the others' boxes. As soon as she opened it, she began to vomit. It was Sally's severed head. Richard Bachman's wife. Ding! Richard's turn. Angela Williams, correct. Open your gift. Guests, check your accounts. Merry Christmas. The room was on fire, another $5,000 in their accounts. Everyone was back to drinking and partying again. Richard went to open his gift. It was his wife, Sally's ring finger, with her wedding band still on it. Ding. We are on a roll. Tom Jr.'s turn. Jimmy from the mail room. Correct. Now open your gifts and guests check your accounts. Merry Christmas. Now this party was really exploding. Kind of intriguing how the contestants have become the spectators and the guests became the stars of this party. Tom opened his gift. It was a picture of his girlfriend fucking the neighbor. Ding. Now for the final question of the game. This question will have a bonus of an extra $10,000 attached if the contestants answer correctly the first time. Timer set at 2 minutes. Question: have you ever killed anyone and who? Merry Christmas. Okay. Now this was insane. How could they know what they were all thinking? How could anyone know their dark, sinister secrets? Was he real? They couldn't tell or they would go to prison. The crowd was shouting again. I had no idea the level this crowd was going to go for money. The timer was winding down. Will they tell the truth or not? The crowd was chanting, "Tell the truth." If you lie, I'll kill you myself. You are all scumbags. Ding. First up is Angela, and her answer is yes. Correct. $10,000 to every guest. Now, Angela, who did you kill? Your mother-in-law. Correct. An extra $10,000 to all the guests. Now, Angela, open your last gift. Guests check your accounts. Merry Christmas. Now the room was silent, except for Tom Sr. You didn't. How could you? How could you kill my mother? Cried Tom Sr. Kill her, murderer. Chop off her head, the crowd chanted. With shaky hands, she opened her last gift. It was the bottle of pills she put in her mother-in-law's drink at Thanksgiving. No one suspected an overdose. It was just assumed she died of natural causes at her age. Ding. Richard's turn. He answered, yes, correct. $10,000 to all guests, and now for the bonus, who did you kill? He answered, Timothy. Correct. Another $10,000 for everyone. Now open your last gift. Timothy was Tom and Richard's childhood friend who died in a hunting accident. Richard opened his last gift, and it was a picture of the three of them the day before they left for their hunting trip. None of the guests cared any longer. The joy had turned into rage. They were chanting, "Kill them! Murderers!" Ding! Last on the list of tonight's game, Tom Jr. Will he answer correct or lie? He answered yes, correct. Now for the extra $10,000. Frankie, Rebecca, Little Ricky, and Jimbo Silverstone, correct. One last gift to open. Merry Christmas. Tom Jr. was scared to open it. It was probably something horrific. His father was yelling now. You killed that family, Thomas? What the fuck? That was you? You were the drunk driver? Tom Jr. reluctantly opened his gift. We have a bonus round. $50,000 for everyone tonight. In Tom Jr.'s last present is a revolver. This crowd has the chance to vote on whether to make Thomas Williams Sr.'s wish come true. Should Thomas Sr. kill these three, or should he not? Let's vote. 2 minutes on the timer. Merry Christmas. Now it was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Only the sounds of the smartphones and the whispers of the three murderers. Ding. Votes are in, and it appears that the decision is unanimous. These three will die at the hands of our host, Tom Sr. If he does it, a $50,000 bonus will be added to all your accounts. Thanks for being part of this year's Williams Christmas party. Merry Christmas. Pop, pop, pop. The gates of hell are open night and day. Smooth the descent, and easy is the way. Virgil. They all just sat there in the heat, and they waited. The kid came back. He was walking down the platform with his head hung low, sweat running down his pimpled face, like always. He was 16, but looked more like 13, short and skinny, with longish dark hair and a black eye. The black eye was always there. It never faded. He took a seat at the end of the bench with the others and looked down at his dirty old sneakers. Roman. Same shit, little man? The kid. Yeah. Roman. I don't know why you even bother no more. They all just sat there in silence. Sandra. It's so hot today. 3 of them looked at her. Roman. Bitch. It's hot out here every day. Sandra. I told you not to call me that. Colonel Duval. Roman, please. Roman gave a tiny chuckle and pulled the pack of Newports from his pocket and lit one up. That pack was always near to full. He exhaled some smoke and looked down the tracks into the distance where the rails slowly bent off into the trees and out of sight. Sandra wrinkled her nose and waved the smoke away. Roman. Man, when this train gonna come? Brian. Why do you always ask that same question over and over? Roman. Yo, man. I already done told you to bite your tongue and stay over there, you strange-ass bitch. Don't make me get up. It's too hot for me to whip your ass right now, you silly-looking motherfucker. They all just sat there in silence. Colette fanned herself with the folded newspaper, looked down the tracks, and then handed it to the colonel, who did the same. Roman took one last drag on his cigarette and then flicked it at Brian seated at the end of the bench, bouncing it off his jeans and leaving a small horsetail of orange sparks in the air as it fell to the platform. Brian did not respond at all. Roman chuckled. The kid. I'm gonna take a walk. Roman. Seriously, man? Again? Is you retarded? The kid. Fuck off. I'm gonna take a walk. You can come with me if you want. Roman. Nah, man. I'm good, shorty. You go off and wander. I'll be cooling it right here when you get back. The kid walked off down the platform towards the exit stairs, giving Roman, or maybe all of them, the finger with his right hand held over his narrow shoulders as he departed, not looking back. As he passed the thermometer mounted on the wall, the temperature read 117 degrees Fahrenheit. Always 117 degrees Fahrenheit. Always. Colette. Can someone remind me how he got here? I know he's told me, but I just can't remember. Sandra. Me neither. They all just quietly sat there in the heat for a while, Roman looking down the tracks every minute or two. He lit another Newport from the bottomless pack. Colette and Sandra both squinted and waved the smoke away. Brian looked up at the sky. Brian. How come the sun never sets? Colette. Sandra. I forgot how you got here too. I know we've discussed this before, but I just can't seem to remember these things. Sandra. I came home from a business trip early one day and found the car that belongs to my husband's 24-year-old secretary blocking the driveway. When I entered the house, I could immediately hear the sounds coming from the bedroom. I went to the stove and blew out the pilot light and turned up the gas. Then I lit a few candles on the dining room table, left the house, and drove my car halfway down the block and watched as it went up in flames a little while later. It's sad that my baby Jason was there in his crib at the time, but I really didn't want to be a single mother. That was in 1972. What year is this? Colette. Oh, that's right. That's just awful. Roman. Yo, do y'all ever plan to shut the fuck up? Making my head hurt over here. Colonel Duval. Roman. I must politely ask you once again to mind your language when speaking with the women. Roman gave him an angry stare and then flicked his cigarette butt out onto the tracks and used his black bandana to wipe the sweat off his forehead. Brian. Are we ever going to get any food? When is the food coming? I'm hungry. Colette. I don't think we can get food here. Sandra. Colette. I forgot how you got here too. What awful thing did you do? Please remind me. Colette gave her an aggrieved stare for a moment, and then revealed a broad smile and answered in a flowery and friendly tone that could not have been less sincere. Colette. I didn't do anything awful, Sandra. Nothing like what you did. Your own child. Unthinkable. No. All I did was fulfill my Lord and Savior's will. When I was working in the hospital, if I saw in a patient's chart that she previously murdered an unborn child, well, I carried out God's will. I did this 6 times before they caught me. I wish it was 6,000. Sandra. I'm an atheist. Colette laughed during her brief reply. Colette. This is probably not the best place for you to cling to that silly notion, dummy. Sandra. Go fuck yourself, Colette. They all went silent for a while. The heat was oppressive. There was no shade. There was no breeze. Brian. When are we going to get something to eat? Colonel Duval. Son, I've been here far longer than any of you. I assure you, there will be no meals served. Brian. Well, we all need water. Will we get some water at some point? The colonel ignored this query. After a while, Roman spoke up. Roman. Yo, old man. Remind me how you got here. Colonel Duval. I was in the war. At Antietam, we captured some rebel soldiers and we needed information about troop locations, numbers, armaments, that sort of intelligence. We did things to them to ensure that we got that information quickly, but later I was court-martialed and they hanged my commanding officer and myself in Washington for our war crimes. It was quite the scandal at that time. Roman. Antietam? Where that at, man? Iraq? Colonel Duval. No, son. That's in Maryland. Can you please remind me how you got here? I'm sorry. My memory is not what it once was. Roman. Shot a few niggas. Colonel Duval. Excuse me, son? Can you repeat that? Roman. Yeah. I shot a few niggas just down the block from where I stay in Washington Heights. I've been running that corner for 3 years, and one day these little bitches show up and just set up shop and start serving my customers. It wasn't something I had to think about much. Shit. I also hit a delivery man bringing some cases of beer into the bodega on that corner, but I didn't mean to do that. He was just in that wrong place at the wrong time. Then I shot it out with the NYPD. It was pretty quick. I caught a few in my back and one in my neck. Anyways, man, that's how I got here. He pointed at the scar on his neck and then lit another cigarette. The kid was walking back down the platform, his olive drab green U.S. Army t-shirt heavily stained with sweat. The thermometer read 117 degrees Fahrenheit, as always. Sandra, can someone remind me how he got here? I can't seem to remember these things for long, for some reason. Colette. I don't recall either, but I'm sure he didn't burn his child to death. Sandra shot an angry look back at her, scowled and looked away, crossing her arms over her chest. Roman looked down the tracks. Sandra. Fuck you, Colette. Colette smiled smugly. Roman, man, when this train gonna come? Sandra, I do feel really bad about my son, Jason. I just didn't know what else to do in that moment. That's why I drove to the bridge afterwards. The kid took a seat at the end of the bench. Sandra, hey kid, I'm sorry. Can you please remind us how you got here? The kid, I took my dad's pistol to school, and I shot a few bullies and this one asshole gym teacher. Then I shot myself. The kid never said very much. Roman, same shit, little man? The kid, yeah, I walked and ended up right back here, just like always. Felt like I was walking for 2 hours. Wish I had my iPhone. How long was I gone that time? Roman, I don't know, man. Maybe 4 or 5 minutes. You see anything new? The kid, number. It doesn't matter which way I go. It's just a long, empty road, and then I pass by an empty high school that looks just like mine, and then I end up back here. He stared down at his dirty old sneakers. Colette, maybe next time you should stop in that school and take some geography classes. She laughed at her own joke, and the kid shot her a grave look. Sandra did too. Sandra. Jean-Paul Sartre said, "Hell is other people." I think he was right. Sandra crossed her arms over her chest and looked away. Colette, how did you get here, Brian? Brian, I already told you. I took 17 women between 1985 and 1992 before I was arrested. Mostly prostitutes. Then I was on death row down in Huntsville for about 14 years until I ran out of appeals. Are they going to bring us any food? They all went silent for a while and stewed in the heat of the brutal, unyielding sun. After a few minutes, Roman looked down the tracks. Roman, man, when this train gonna come? Colonel Duval, I wouldn't be in such a rush, son. Roman, oh yeah, why dat? Colonel Duval paused and looked at the tracks running off in the opposite direction, towards the desert, before looking back at Roman. Colonel Duval, well, son, we don't know where that train is going to take us, do we? He paused for another moment and stared off towards the desert again. He spoke without looking back this time. He spoke quietly. Colonel Duval, maybe this is the best part. What if it only gets worse from here? What if this is just the beginning? Roman lit another cigarette and then turned away and quietly stared in the other direction, down the tracks to the point where the rails bent off and disappeared beyond the trees. He exhaled, and the smoke drifted down the bench towards the others. They all sat there and waited for the train. Eventually, the kid took another walk and then returned a short time later, drenched in sweat. Brian remained hungry. Colette and Sandra refused to look at one another. The colonel had a solemn cast to his face, and Roman continued to reach into his endless pack of cigarettes. The temperature was 117 degrees Fahrenheit. They all just sat there in the heat, and they waited.